So apparently it's the thing that when a newborn baby is born, and this goes back since like the 1970s, they do what's called a heel pinprick, where they take a bit of blood from the baby to test it for a variety of different diseases. That's the core reason that they do it. That turns out to be not the only thing they do with that blood. In some cases, it can be used even years and years later by the cops to try to solve crimes. And that's where it gets a little bit dystopic and a little bit weird. So there's a lawsuit that's been filed in New Jersey. They allege that state police sought a newborn's blood sample from the New Jersey Department of Health to investigate the child's father in connection with a sexual assault from the 1990s. They say that police obtained the blood sample of a newborn child, who's now, by the way, elementary school age. So this was years later, to perform a DNA analysis that linked the baby's father to a crime. It was done using a technique called investigative genetic genealogy or forensic genealogy. It involves isolating DNA left at a crime scene and using it to create a digital genetic profile of a suspect, which is already a terrifying phrase. Investigators can upload this information to genealogy websites where other people have freely shared their own DNA information in the hope of connecting with family members or learning about their ancestry. Now, because DNA is shared across families, that means investigators can use relatively close matches to try to map out the suspect family tree and possibly narrow down on their identity. As a side note, yes, many of those genealogy websites, they do cooperate with law enforcement in this way, and people are knowingly giving their DNA. It is interesting to know if you're like 2% Irish, I will grant you that, but it might be used by someone else. Anyway, yeah, once that information is out there, they can use it, and they apparently do. And look, potentially catching someone who committed a sexual assault, I think is a good thing. But the fact that like, it's not like the baby could consent or not to the blood being taken, and I doubt the parents knew back then that it could be used. And in this case, it might seem just, but there being like an entire ever-expanding like database of baby DNA that can be used to track people down. I'm not a fan of that, Jackson, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's definitely a cause for concern and real regulation that the people have to have some type of real hold over. Otherwise, man, that could be used for all types of stuff. It could be used just to find people for whatever reasons. You know what I mean? Because if you have some real resources behind that, you could identify who somebody is. And then, obviously we have other ways to track people via just, what they do with their credit cards and where they've stayed and stuff. So that combined with DNA, oh man. Especially the way the country's going is it's leaning more and more into authoritarianism, especially just, big portions of it. So, this is definitely something that, is gonna have to see some real policy attention including just like general data that people have personal data and privacy. So I think this all lumps into it.
Yeah, I really do think that, and we're gonna get to a couple of other ways that this sort of data is used. I really do think that like it is time for a reckoning about like digital privacy.
Yeah.
I feel like people have occasionally lashed out at like one social media network for some sort of violation or something like that, or a leak of data from a credit card company. But like fundamentally, I think that a lot has changed way faster than the law has changed. So in particular, when it comes to genetic material, I feel like that is worth a little bit of government attention. And then we can get into things like, like cookie tracking and stuff like that. There's a lot of issues with the sort of information that people can freely access, whether for law enforcement reasons or just for capitalist exploitation. But I want to give you an example of a little bit broader of how this works, because we have this one case we've already talked about. So back in December 2020, a local TV station reported that police in California had issued 5 search warrants to access newborn screening samples. And then at least one cold case there was solved with the help of a newborn blood. In a recent case, sort of related, police in San Francisco used a sample collected during a woman's rape exam to tie her to an unrelated property crime years later. And so people are saying that this is an unlawful search and seizure. And like as with the baby blood, there are court cases to try to challenge this. But I wonder, with like the judiciary that we have, what are the chances that this ends up being prohibited? Like, if this gets to the Supreme Court, are we supposed to believe that the like rabid conservative Supreme Court we have right now would hamper the police's ability to do this? I mean, never mind the fact that in theory, conservatives should be against this. They're against Big Brother and all that they say. But conservative justices, I wonder. I feel like we really need to take stock of this, Jackson. Something needs to be done legislation-wise.
Well, and far right-wing conservatives are definitely in favor of anything that increases authoritative power. Look what they just did with, I think it was an Arizona case in the Miranda rights, to where they basically made it so that you ain't got to read it to them if you don't want to. Basically, so, absolutely, there's no reason for us to believe that if this made it to the Supreme Court, that the current bench wouldn't be like, oh, this is great. You know what I mean? So that's and it's just crazy to see how such few people can have this large of an impact on the country and people's lives.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.